Was our foreign editor, Angela Diffley. And Angela, it's not just Kamala Harris who's recently been in Ghana. Lots of other American leaders have been in that part of the world. Why this sudden interest on the continent from US officials?
Yes, a number of officials, Jill Biden, Janet Yellen, to different countries in Africa. We saw Antony Blinken. There is a sudden surge of interest, as you say, from Washington in Africa. And there are a number of reasons for this. There is what some people are calling the new Scramble for Africa taking place. It is very different from the first time around. Of course, the Scramble for Africa, that phrase describes the late 19th century period where Britain, France, and other European powers basically fought their way to control of various countries in Africa and pillaged their resources. This time around, Africa has a great deal more agency in whose influence it chooses to chuck in its lot with and who it chooses to woo itself. And so these different countries are fully aware that there is a rivalry now for influence on the African continent. The three major big powers at the moment, China, Russia, and the United States, has woken up to the fact that its interests are possibly about to be undermined, and it needs to protect its own interests and push ahead in Africa if China and Russia are not to have too much influence. The United States tends to link any aid or investment with it says it likes to ensure that there are democratic principles. That has put off in the past some African leaders from partnerships with the US. Autocratic African leaders prefer perhaps to throw in their lot with China, which has a non-intervention policy, isn't really interested in how things are run so long as everybody gets what they signed up to get. Russia, as we've seen, has been increasingly involved militarily in Africa. And we've seen in Mali and Burkina Faso coups and a leaning on the Russian Wagner mercenary army there. And so these are all current influences in Africa. Cyril Ramaphosa, on a recent visit to Washington, said, "We will choose the people with whom we associate." And he made very clear that there would be no exclusive partnerships, he thought, amongst African countries and major powers. They might choose to ally themselves with this country for this country for that. There will be no exclusivity. So that's something key to take account of. And here we are, Washington pushing ahead, trying to further its own interests in Africa as it watches Russia and China mount. Another key reason which has injected some kind of urgency into this is that the recent votes on Russia's invasion of Ukraine, if you look at the countries that abstained in that vote, half of them were from Africa. So in terms of world geopolitics, it's good to have favourable relationships with African countries. So that's another key reason as well. It's also the country of the future, a very young population, which is just going to become more and more dominant in the world.
So I suppose that's sort of the continent-wide perspective here, Angela. But what about the three countries that Kamala Harris is visiting on this trip? Ghana, Tanzania and Zambia. Why there?
Yeah, Ghana is a relatively stable country in terms of its democracy. It's been really relatively successful, had several very successful transitions from one leader to another. And that is a key point about Ghana. Nevertheless, recently it's been having trouble with its economy. It's now got inflation at above 50%. It is looking to the IMF. It wants to try to restructure its debts. It's in big trouble, and America thinks it might be able to help out there and also to encourage a more not just Washington focused, but to get people together to try and help out on this issue of debt defaults. So that's one of the key reasons. Zambia, Tanzania also have economic problems, and all of these countries have minerals. Zambia is very, very copper rich and has other critical minerals. Tanzania has lithium. There are mining contracts here. There is a big opportunity for business investment, which could benefit both sides and give those governments the cash to deliver better social improvements for their populations. So as always, it could be a win-win situation. It's up to these governments to negotiate the best deals for their own national interests.
Angela Diffley, thanks very much indeed. And we'll have some more analysis on Kamala Harris's trip coming up in about half an hour or so.